Welcome to the Healthy Investor Podcast with Bob Mastroianni, where you and I will learn from successful real estate investors, entrepreneurs, and other highly driven individuals about their journey and the healthy habits and routines that play an integral part of their growth. All right, welcome back to the Healthy Investor Podcast. Today we have on our show Bill Hamel. Bill has been a multifamily real estate investor since he was 21 years old. He focused on accumulating a portfolio of small to medium-sized properties for many years. He self-managed his portfolio up until 2019. At that point, Bill decided to move away from hands-on property management so he could focus on scaling into larger multifamily investments. Bill discovered Jake and Gino in late 2020, seeking the proper education and a proximity to other like-minded investors. Since shifting his focus from property management in 2019, Bill has purchased 7 properties totaling 196 units. He currently has $30 million in assets under management. In addition to real estate investing, Bill has run the Boston Marathon twice and completed the full-length Ironman in Lake Placid, New York. He's also scheduled to run a 50-mile ultra marathon this 4th of July weekend. Wow, impressive stuff. Bill Hamel, thanks so much for being on today.
Thanks for having me, Bob. Some of that stuff on the, not so much the investing end, but that racing end just sent shivers through my body, remembering the end of that Ironman. Geez, in 2015, I think I started feeling the pain.
Wow. Yeah, that's something that I definitely want to dive into because, as you know, I, on a much different level, participate in triathlons. I'm more of a sprint Olympic triathlon guy. So as we get further down the line in the conversation, I'm definitely going to ask you some questions about the Lake Placid and preparation and the feelings and all of that fun stuff. So it's exciting. Yeah. So let's talk just a little bit about your portfolio and your business. So you've been in business since you were 21 years old in multifamily real estate, and you did a lot of self-managing of your portfolio. So let's talk just a little bit about that portfolio, how you built it, where it started, and kind of, what you were able to build it to over those years.
I started at 21, as you mentioned. I was a cook in a restaurant, junior year at SUNY Albany. And I was a bit concerned of what I was going to do with my future. And I was dating a cocktail waitress at that restaurant, and she broke my heart. And at that point, that was the trigger. I need to do something with myself. I became very concerned, read a book, and off I went. I was looking for that first property.
So do you remember the name of the book?
Yeah, Nothing Down for the 90s by Robert Allen.
Oh, okay. Wow. Robert Allen. Is that the same Robert Allen from Multiple Streams of Income?
I bet. Yeah, he did a Nothing Down for the 2000s. So he's been able to keep himself relevant. I believe that is the same guy. And when I read that book, the main message was no money down, creative financing. Ultimately, I was 21. I was pretty immature, pretty raw at the time. I just saw the potential investing in real estate. And one of the main messages was just go out and start lowballing offers. If you throw out 40 or 50 lowballs, you might get 1 or 2 accepted, and good way to get started.
Great. So at that time, were you looking to renovate those properties? Were you doing fix and flip, or was it buy and hold and rental properties from the beginning?
The first 3 were just buying right off of the multiple listing service. And I did that on the first 3, and it went fairly well cash flow wise.
Okay.
I bought what I expected based on, if I buy this, back then if I buy this property for $60,000 and I rent the apartments for $650 a piece, I would get that I don't know, at the time, maybe a $450, $500 cash flow per month, move on to the second property, move on to the third. And that was the beginning until I discovered foreclosures and distressed properties, and having that potential from buying something less expensive, having to put some work into it, and have that escalated finished value where you're able to see equity immediately.
Okay. Now, were you looking at foreclosure properties? Is this still in the 90s?
Yes, I would say in 1995 was that first foreclosure I purchased. And after the first one, that excited me. So
Yeah.
you went into that next phase of real estate investing, which was exclusively searching for foreclosures. So we were now into the rehab business.
Okay, great, great. Well, it's interesting to hear you talking about the foreclosure process in the 90s. I think, to some extent, people think about foreclosures, they think about the most recent downturn in the, 2008 to 11 when foreclosures started to become popular, but it wasn't necessarily a new idea. It's just that I guess more people were doing it then. You probably were one of the few doing foreclosures back in that time, right?
What I saw was it doesn't matter the market cycle or if there's a recession where there's a lot of foreclosures, there's going to be foreclosures continuously throughout.
Sure.
This is what I found out early on. As a young kid, I'm like, how are these people just losing their homes with all of this equity still there? And then realizing as time went on, life happens to everybody, including us. And in people's situations, foreclosing on a house, it could be a death, could be illness, could be divorce, many different reasons why, somebody shifts their focus from, taking care of their housing responsibilities and unfortunately falls into that category.
Yeah. Wow. That's very interesting. So then fast forward, you have your first few properties. I assume these were smaller type apartment buildings. And so now we're talking the next 15 to 20 years of accumulating more properties, more rentals. How did that portfolio grow and what were you able to grow that into?
First 5 or 6 years was buying the small properties, buying the foreclosures, 2-3 units. And 7 or 8 years into my career, I stumbled into a larger commercial property that was not a foreclosure, but it was an auction property.
Okay.
And I did not expect to win that bid, but I was on that front lawn, just more curious because now I was really excited by auctions. And this auction got off to a slow start, and the beginning price was very inexpensive, and nobody else was bidding on it. And I couldn't help myself. I made that first bid. The auction went on for another 2 or 3 minutes, and I was a successful bidder on this commercial property that needed some work. I was going to put that in the portfolio. I got a quick lesson on vacant commercial property, meaning banks aren't excited about lending on vacant commercial property. So I was a little ahead of my skis on that one. Fortunately, we got a bank that took a chance on us. We were able to get to the closing table on that. And then the next challenge was leasing thousands of square foot of office space, another area I was not familiar with, and had small success with small amounts of space. But ultimately, I didn't have the patience level to really hold on long term to get that commercial office space filled. So after a year, I flipped that property and did pretty well on that. And at that point, I saw the value in investing in commercial real estate. So I started looking for larger multifamily at that point.
Okay. And then, so when you talk about larger multifamily, from a standpoint of banking, we refer to residential as anything 1 to 4 units, and commercial sort of fits into anything 5 unlimited. So what range are you talking about here for larger commercial or larger
Shortly
multifamily?
after I grabbed a 7 unit,
Okay.
that worked out well back in 2000, 2002. You were still able to just jump on the MLS and literally have some choices where you could buy multifamily properties. At the time, I bought this thing at 13-14% cap rate in a good location of the city of Albany. And it was on the market for like 60 days. That was the state of the market then. So just goes to show you how times change.
Yeah. Well, very interesting. Just to talk about cap rates, the first commercial real estate seminar I ever went to was in 2011. And the person who was running the seminar said, my investors prefer a 10 cap. And cap rates today are somewhere in the 4 to 6, right?
Yeah, it's funny you say the 10 cap, it's such an even number to shoot for. But after I became a little bit more experienced in commercial multifamily, I still had that same idea of buying no money down. So I would, and just like on the 7 unit, I would get a first mortgage from the bank, and then I would go to my private lender, get the second mortgage. And when you're buying at a 14% cap rate, you're able to completely finance or 100% finance that type of a deal, and the rents cover all the expenses. So it was not as challenging as it would be now to purchase property no money down.
Interesting. Very interesting. So you mentioned your investor. During that period, did you have multiple investors that you worked with? Did you have sort of a list of investors you were working with, or primarily a small group?
I've always had a couple private lenders where they were less than 10%. So it was a little easier to do those no money down deals, where I had private lenders that were a bit more flexible. Then I had a couple more private lenders that were more of the hard money.
Okay.
So when I decided to flip a property, I was able to utilize them for some short-term financing until the property was sold. In my early years, I would make my list of resources, however that would get me to the closing table. And that could have looked like just borrowing money from fellow employees at the restaurant I worked at, where I would borrow $5,000 for somebody and give them $6,000 back in 6 months.
Oh, that's a pretty good
after I
turnaround.
refinanced. So looking back, it was a bit loan shark type, but I didn't have great resources in the early days. In addition to that, it was I made a habit of collecting credit cards.
Oh, okay.
And one property, I think it was the 8th property I ever purchased for $37,000 at the Albany County Courthouse auction. I paid $37,000 and bought the property with cash advances from 7 or 8 credit cards.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So really a mixture of different opportunities and trying to find money sort of wherever you can in order to get the deal done. Very interesting. So in a conversation that you and I had in the past, I remember you talking about, and we're going to fast forward just a little bit to more recent times. You sort of got to the point where you realized you were wearing all the hats, right? You were fixing windows, fixing properties, going there and collecting rents and running the asset management. And I guess it started, not to put words in your mouth, but started to cause a little bit of a burnout of sorts, correct? Is that fair to say?
Very, very fair to say. It just took a long time. In the early days, me and my best friend at the time bought those first several properties, and we developed a portfolio. Shortly, 7 or 8 years in, I partnered up with my brother and I built another portfolio with him. But throughout that time, I didn't know any better, where it was buy a property. As soon as that property is purchased, okay, we put on the tool belt and we fixed up the property. Then you put on your leasing agent hat and you rent it. and
Yeah.
then you're the property manager. It's funny because it took me so many years where, sometimes you're just thinking, and I realize I haven't bought a property in quite some time, and a light bulb goes off because I'm a focus guy. And looking back, I can see that my focus went from being a property finder, an accumulator of rental property, to a busy property manager. So it occurred to me, I'm like, I'm not finding properties at this point because I'm spending all my brain energy and physical energy rehabbing and managing.
Right. Right. And at that point, nobody's looking for the next property.
Yeah. No one's looking for the next property, or you're just not looking hard enough. We all know that this is 7-day-a-week game. And that was fine. I would, at that point, I wouldn't dare have anybody else manage our properties. We were the property manager. We were building this portfolio, and we were, going where we wanted to be. It was just over time realizing these different phases of the journey. But ultimately, and probably around 2012, 2013 is when I realized, after going to a Tony Robbins seminar, Business Mastery, to become an owner, not an operator of your business, which was very interesting to me, which I wanted very badly.
Yeah.
Because at that point, I had already let it get way out of hand. And the goal was, build your employee staff so they can do all of the 7-day-a-week busy work. We should be operating our business. We should be working on our business, growing our business. And at that point, the main takeaway from that seminar was building that operations manual.
Okay.
So from that point, I built an operations manual to manage all of the rental properties we had in that capital region location, and have our employees run it. And that was the goal for the next several years. And I had a difficult time. I made a very, very bad habit over the years to be so involved in the day-to-day, and I was not able to take myself enough out of that day-to-day.
Okay.
And ultimately, that's what leads to the burnout.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So that's very interesting. And, over the process for me, I'm transitioning into larger multifamily, trying to learn from some successful investors like yourself. And one of the interesting quotes that I've heard a few times so far is that, do you want to be a real estate investor, or do you want to build a real estate business? And it's very interesting when you talk about the focus. And if we're trying to truly build a real estate business, then we have to build it like a business, right? And, not nearly, my investment background is not on the same scale as yours by any means, but I went down a similar path where if we were rehabbing a property, I was tiling floors, I was helping with plumbing, and then answering the phone when the tenants were calling. And it is a process that, you're right, we get that mentality of, well, that's what I'm supposed to do, right? So now fast forwarding to where you are now, 196 units, over 7 properties. Tell me about how that transitioned, and then tell me about what's different as far as how the properties are managed, about how the properties are handled, and really what role you prefer to play in your investments now.
Since I pivoted away from property management, basically in 2020, because I sold a lot of our smaller properties.
Okay.
All of the singles, the 2s, the 6s and 8s all got sold. We kept a handful of larger properties we're in good locations, and we're at least over 10 units. At that point, I had to figure out, okay, what's my next move? I wasn't exactly sure, because that was pretty drastic after 26, 27 years to take that step. But it wasn't long before I was surfing on the internet and, just trying to see what I would stumble into. So, I'm seeing Grant Cardone type things, and eventually stumbled into Jake and Gino's podcast 2 or 3 months later. After listening to that, I knew that I wanted to scale. I
Okay.
knew that I wanted to get into, from the way I explain it a lot, is go from the minor leagues to the major leagues of real estate investing.
Yes.
That,
Yes.
purchasing that 100-unit apartment complex was something on my radar. And at this point in my career, I was easily convinced to join a mentorship group was the way to go, because I did not want to figure that out on my own.
Okay.
Yes, you can do that with 2s and 3s, but I'm not going to experiment and make a lot of mistakes buying a 100-unit apartment complex. And at that point in time, I was no longer a property manager. My focus was buying large assets.
Okay.
And it's amazing, you get what you focus on. I was able to, over a couple-year period of time, get into a large handful of larger buildings that totaled close to 200 units. And that was the goal.
That's great. That's great. So from that perspective, we sort of talk about larger multifamily as a team sport. When you're buying these properties now, are you partnering up with other investors? Are you building a team? Have you built a team that you work specifically with, or are you looking for different team members for different opportunities? How are you looking for properties from a team perspective?
It's still transactional. I
Okay.
had those 2 partnerships throughout my career, and I did purchase a 16-unit and a 40-unit shortly after I pivoted away from property management with my longtime partner, who's my brother. And we were able to do that, I don't want to say simply, but when you own a lot of property and you've been able to generate a lot of equity, it's nice, and I guess consider it somewhat creative, to take equity out of properties you currently own, and you purchase another property with that equity, create
Okay.
a blanket mortgage of all of these properties that ultimately pays for that down payment on the new property. So I
Okay.
was able to do that with him. Also able to have that proximity with Jake and Gino mentorship community, meet a lot of great people. You get close to certain people that you can, at this point, are great friends and all like-minded. I've been looking in Florida, got a few deals down there where I partnered up with a few great investors there. But every transaction has looked a little bit different as far as the partnerships go.
Sure. Okay. Okay. Great. Great. Wow. Well, I am impressed by your experience, and I also think you're extremely humble about the amount of experience that you have, because you really have a lot of success over a long period of time, which is really great to see. It's such a cool thing to hear you talk about transitioning in the same way that I'm going through right now. About 2 years ago, you started the transition, find a mentorship group, and put yourself in proximity with these like-minded individuals, similar goals. Some of them have more success and they're helping to pull us along. And so I'm sort of in the beginning of that path. So it's exciting for me to see that you're a couple of years down the road, and how that's paid off for you. So it's really cool to see. So I want to transition over a little bit. This is the Healthy Investor Podcast. So we want to talk about your habits, routines, and some of the things that you find are advantageous to your business and advantageous to your growth. In the beginning, we spoke about you completing some Boston marathons, Lake Placid full triathlon. For those who don't know, can you tell us just a little bit about exactly what's entailed in completing the Lake Placid full triathlon, as far as the different different lengths of each unit.
I always say this and people roll their eyes, but anybody can do this. You just have to train for it.
Yeah.
And, no different than anything in life, you start, slowly but surely. If you want to run a marathon, you get out there and run a mile.
Yeah.
And you slowly progress. Eventually, after 4 or 5 months, you're running 15, 20 miles if that's the angle you're taking. The Ironman came off of the second Boston Marathon I did. I was able to achieve the goal I set out in the 2014 Boston. And at that point, I said, okay, what's next? And I had a friend in 2014 doing Lake Placid Ironman. And when you're watching a good friend do a full-length Ironman, I just came off of Boston. So that day I'm like, I'm doing that next year. And ultimately it was just that. So for the next 10 months, I was focusing on, stretching out my swimming ability in the open water, starting slow and stretching out.
Yeah.
And, running was already a strong discipline of mine. So, I checked that box, wasn't a major concern there. But other than that, it's going out and buying a nice road bike and putting in the miles. And ultimately, over a 10-month period of time, you're going from training 6 hours a week to 7 hours a week, onward and onward to the point when you're 2 or 3 months away from the Ironman race, you're training 14 or 15 hours a week.
Wow. So the interesting thing and amazing accomplishment, I have friends who have completed half Ironmans and I have friends who have completed full Ironmans. And I know the commitment that goes into that, the training commitment and the focus. The interesting thing for me, and as I mentioned, I do some triathlons on a sprint level or Olympic level, which is much different distances for each section. For a full Ironman, the swim is 2.4 miles, which is a pretty significant swim. Then you ride 112 miles. So now after swimming 2.4 miles, 112 miles on the bike is a pretty significant amount of time. It's hours. It's literally hours on the bike. About how many hours do you think it would take you to complete the bike at 112 miles?
Well, I remember now. Let's see. I was happy to get out of the water. Swimming is my weakest area. So in about an hour, I think it was hour 28 minutes, I got out of that chaotic water, and that was a victory in itself for me.
Yes.
So I just did the 2.4 and I'm out of the water and I was feeling good just because of that. At that point, I was decent on the bike and I was able to do the 112, I think, in probably, I think it was around 6 hours, close to 6.5 hours.
Wow.
And yeah, that is certainly very fatiguing once you get to that point. But, I was in pretty good shape. I didn't have experience. That's where, after the run came in, now I'm finishing the bike, I'm in transition, and while I'm getting ready for the run, in my mind, I'm like, this is fantastic. I feel good. I got my run left. This is my bread and butter. And I came out of that tent like a bat out of hell. I tend to get ahead of myself at certain times, especially when the excitement kicks in. And I came out and did a 5K in like 21 minutes.
Ooh.
And blew up my race. I finished fine, but I made my marathon absolutely miserable because I started off so fast.
Well, that's the interesting thing that I was going to say. So, you're about an hour and a half into the swim, 6.5 hours on the bike. So you're 8 hours into this event. And then what's left is a marathon, a full marathon after 8 hours into this event, which is, there's a whole other topic of nutrition and hydration. And, aside from all of that. So, and I think this is probably a pretty good transition into, you're focusing now on this 50-mile ultra marathon. You've already successfully done an 8-hour session and then started a marathon, 26.2 miles. So as you're planning for this 50-mile ultra marathon, what are some of the things that you're focusing on? And what are some of the, I don't even know that I know how to train for something that's 50 miles. and as you said earlier, until you do it, that's how you do it, right? So for me, a little bit of a stretch is going 10 miles, maybe 13.1 to get to a half marathon. So 50 seems like a pretty big mountain.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing how valuable experience is. And I learned the hard way on that full-length Ironman. And I was told that your first Ironman, you're not gonna kill it because you've never done one, and there's no other way other than making a bunch of mistakes. And just like we do in life and in real estate investing, we all learn from our mistakes. And I would do the Ironman much, much differently at this point, but I am able to use that experience for this 50-miler. And I have always been a pretty good preparer, but for preparation plus using that experience, I'm looking to translate into, I don't want to say an enjoyable race. I know it's going to be very, very difficult, but a smart race. Let me put it that way, where garbage in, garbage out. You get what you put into anything.
Okay.
Meaning, I'm putting in those training sessions that are going to get me to that point where my body is going to be able to withstand running 50 miles. So I've figured out, because I'm right in the middle of this training right now, basically it has nothing to do with cardio at this point. It's all about basically training your body to be very uncomfortable and dealing with a certain degree of pain. Right now, my feet have blisters on top of blisters from the training. And the marathon I ran this past weekend, it's a marathon. Your body starts feeling from head to toe that type of pain after 20 miles or so. And that's what's necessary to train longer and longer and longer, to the point where that when you have to run past that 40-mile mark, your body is used to that pain. And I probably won't be used to the pain that between 40 and 50.
Sure.
But after 40 or so, I guess that's where the mindset comes in.
Yeah. Well, so one final training question for you. From now until your 50-mile ultra marathon 4th of July week, will you continue to scale up, and what will your longest run be? I know you just did a marathon this past weekend. So how far do you feel like you should scale before going for it?
This weekend coming up, I'll do a 30-mile on Saturday and a 15-mile on Sunday. So that would be considered a back-to-back workout, which I've already been doing. So that'll give me 45 miles in 2 days. Wow. Which sets you up for a 50-mile race in one. And then the final weekend will be my last big workout, which will be similar, a little longer, and then a 3-week taper.
Oh, wow. Wow. Okay. Well, best of luck to you. I'm excited to follow your journey here and see your results. I know you'll be successful, but it's really inspiring to just see how it goes for you and just to watch the process. What is it about these this fitness and this, these events, these pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone? what is it about those that you feel can also relate to your business and how you can stay focused on your business? Are there things that you feel translate or also keep you going?
Absolutely. I've always prided myself on hard work, and that's got me into trouble because it's not all about working hard. Early in my investing career, I was just happy going home at 6:30 at night after working 10 or 12 hours really hard on the wrong stuff,
Mhm.
and realizing working smarter is much more needle moving than working harder. But in the same thing, I guess you could say the same thing even in marathoning or Ironman. I learned the hard way at the Ironman Lake Placid that if I was a bit smarter or much smarter going into the marathon, I would have had a much better time and a much more enjoyable finish of that race. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of similarities there.
Okay, great. Well, awesome. I appreciate you coming on today. I want to move into the final segment where we ask the same 3 questions of all of our guests. So first thing for you, Bill, what is your definition of success?
My definition of success at this point is helping as many people as I possibly can who are at the beginning stages of investing or in the beginning stages of doing endurance exercises. I am very passionate about helping people not make the same mistakes that I did.
Oh, that's great. One of the big reasons that I wanted to start this podcast is because not only do I have a passion for self-education, but I also have a passion for passing that on. And I just feel that this is a great opportunity for me to learn from others and share it at the same time. So I love your ability to, and your interest in just trying to help others and trying to pass on to others. I think we can learn from other people's successes, and we can also learn from other people's failures. And those of us who are willing to pass that information on to others, I think they'll really benefit from them. So that's a great definition. I love it. For someone who's new to investing or even just learning about focusing on their goals and their path to success, can you give us a good book recommendation?
Oh, geez, a good book recommendation, the one that sticks, and it's not even real estate related. It's called Awareness by Anthony DeMello. And it's just about being aware of everything you're doing from minute to minute, day to day, month to month, and a certain awareness. For me, it's just being aware of putting different meanings on things and being able to control your emotions throughout the day. So you're able to be as successful throughout your day. It could be the littlest things, but ultimately it is focusing on the needle mover items that make the difference and doing it in a way that it's healthy for me. And healthy for me is to just take everything in stride and react positively to no matter what comes along.
Well, that's a great suggestion. I'm going to add Awareness to my list of books to read in the future. And, you're right. It's so interesting. When I first started really this journey of, becoming healthier and creating a healthier mindset for myself, there's time that's involved, and there's time involved in self-education. And the first thing I had to do was say, where can I find the time? And, hearing you talk about awareness just sort of reminds me of that transition for me, because the first thing that I realized is that I was sitting up late at night, watching late night TV, and then sleeping late in the morning. And I said, again, to your comment there about awareness, right? If I can stop watching the late night TV and go to bed earlier, I could use those extra 2 hours to get up earlier and start my day in a more positive way, and maybe exercise a little bit and meditate a little bit. So I'm interested to hear about that book, because I think it falls right in line with some of my thinking. So very cool. So I want to thank you again for taking your time to come out and spending time with me today. I really, really appreciate everything that you've given here. This has been a lot of fun for me. How can I support you? How can we support you and listeners support you and even reach out to you?
Oh, I appreciate you asking that, Bob. I have a podcast of my own. It's called the Collecting Real Estate Podcast. So if anybody wants to go to the normal platforms, Apple, Spotify, take a listen to our Collecting Real Estate Podcast, which focuses on people's real estate collections. You can reach me at Bill@HAMEL realestate.com. Feel free to reach out. And I love talking real estate.
Great, great. Awesome. So I'm going to move into the final question for you, Bill. If you could think back to a young 10 to 12-year-old Bill, knowing what you've learned so far on your journey, what are 3 pieces of advice that you would give to a young Bill or really any preteen child to help guide them towards success?
It's easy saying back now when I was 10 or 12, even 17 or 18. Oh, geez. Get more serious. And I guess second thing is even growing more mature. Don't take yourself too seriously.
Okay. Yeah.
And, at the same time, don't care what anybody else thinks. I believe that through my childhood, probably well into my 20s and probably a certain degree now, worrying about what other people thinks is absolutely nonsensical. It does not serve us at all.
Oh, that's great. That's great. You can check him out on the Collecting Real Estate Podcast. Bill Hamel, thank you so much for being here. And thanks everyone for checking out the Healthy Investor Podcast. Make it a great day. Thanks so much for joining me on the Healthy Investor Podcast. Check out the show notes for more information about connecting with our guest. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please head on over to iTunes and leave a positive rating and review. It would mean the world to me. I'm grateful for your support, and I wish you an abundance of success on your journey to healthy investments and a healthy life.